everybody, we're back to the complete story, and if you might have noticed, last time we did this, it was the complete story of hemp, which would leave little room for me to come and give you more story. But how can a story ever be complete? It's never complete, and certainly if I'm in charge of stories, they never get ended. They just go on and on and on forever, because we always learn more, and we cannot help ourselves from doing anything other than learning more. So, in our new complete story, which can't be a complete story, but the second iteration of an eventual completeness that'll finish itself out somewhere with my grandchildren's age, here we are. Old wine and new skin, CBD and nanoparticle hemp extract. You see a prettier slide? That's a nicer title slide than our last one, and there's that pretty field of hemp. And we are going to talk, of course, about cannabidiol. We're going to talk about some pharmacokinetics of uptake that we have. We have great data on this CBD of ours that is taking the CBD world by storm. And we're going to talk about more about why do I think that CBD is the most important thing, the most important supplement to hit the functional and integrative medical world in the last, let's move that over there. How does that look now, Christina?
Much better, thank you.
Oh, good. All right, now I can't see my little video, so I don't know. Am I in the screen? Am I out of the screen?
You are.
I'm out of the screen. All right. Okay, so why do I think that CBD is the most important supplement to hit the functional and integrative medical world in the last 20, 30 years? Because it is. And why is it? Because it has so much effect on the brain down. I mean, you're going to hear this a lot coming from functional medicine people, coming from A4M, the Metabolic Medicine Institute. I was just with Fiona Crawford from the Ross Camp Institute, and she was talking about how she was just a New Hope and everything's neck up. You know, we used to like the whole body, now we just like the brain. Now, why do we just like the brain? Now, in the brain, you have a brain. And when the brain is rattled, you have neuroinflammation. The key there to the rest of your body is that it disrupts the autonomic nervous system. When that neuroinflammation cascades down, you have disruption of the autonomics. Now, what happens when you have disruption of the autonomics? Now, if we were in Europe and we were studying German biological medicine or some of the biological medicine in France, they'd say, well, of course, the autonomic nervous system controls perfusion to the whole body, which means controlling blood flow to the different organs, to the different areas of the body, even skeletal muscle. And when there's disruption in the autonomics, there's disruption in regulation of breathing, regulation of heart, regulation of digestion, and there's disruption in perfusion. So you may be starving one of your organs unwittingly just by having a chronic neuroinflammatory process. And so what creates neuroinflammatory processes? Just about everything we're exposed to these days. So we've got mold toxins, we've got Lyme disease toxins, we've got dysbiotic toxins, we've got mercury, cadmium, arsenic, lead. You name it, if it has a neurological impact, it is probably mediated through glutamate receptors in the brain. When this happens, there's an explosion of free radical activity, peroxynitrite free radicals. We're going to look at a sort of downward spiral between the microglia in the brain and the glutamate receptors in the neurons and how they get this self-perpetuating cycle of neurotoxicity. Well, that's a little bummer if we initiate this fire in the brain and it won't stop. But what is not a bummer is that CBD is able to damp that, is able to step on that cycle and stop it. So, what are we going to talk about today? Well, let's start by reviewing the endocannabinoid system and what that is and which are the endocannabinoids. Endo means inside, meaning yes, we have cannabinoid receptors and cannabinoids that we make in our body. Then we'll talk just briefly about the phytocannabinoids, THC versus CBD, and then we will focus in on our subject here, which is CBD in that delicious nanoemulsion. So we're going to take you through a tour of liposomes and lipid nanoparticles, and in particular the Quicksilver delivery systems. One of the problems that I've run into of late is that there's all these companies out there making claims about their liposomal products. One manufacturer in particular likes to make a lot of claims in comparison to ours, and he does a great job of co-opting my language and talking about size and saying basically, oh look, ours are smaller than Quicksilver's and they cost less. Well, it's not true, so we're going to lead you through a little exercise in how to visually distinguish size and quality in liposomes and lipid nanoparticles. Then, of course, we'll show you the pharmacokinetic data of the nano-emulsion hemp extract. Here it says liposomal, but I'll also tell you how do you distinguish a liposome from a nano-emulsion. And then we're going to talk about the applications of hemp extract and cannabidiol to functional medicine. The two main areas, neuroinflammation, blocking neuroinflammation, and gene transcription. See which genes go up, which genes go down, because CBD has an immense effect on gene expression in the body. So here's a slide from my friend Martha Montemayor. I'm going to go down and talk at her forum in about an hour and a half. Let's hope I have the energy to do that. I have Nanomojo though. So, endogenous cannabinoid system. Endogenous means inside. It means it's made within the body. And cannabinoid receptors have been part of the body for millions of years. It's very interesting looking at the evolution of cannabinoid receptors. In fact, I had a slide in my autism talk, and I forgot to bring it over to this one, looking at the evolution of cannabinoid receptors, and it was millions and millions of years ago. It's really impressive. The cannabinoid system and signaling in the body has been part of multicelled organisms for millions of years. And the endocannabinoid system, as it's evolving and we're learning about it, we're finding that it's kind of this glue, this neuroendoimmune glue. What does that mean? So there's different neurochemicals in your brain. You've got the hormone structures and the immune structures. So in there is the endocannabinoid system, just kind of gluing all of these different things together so they don't get out of control. So you'll see when chronic disease, you'll see your hormones are getting flipped over, your immune system's getting flipped over. I talk a lot about TH1, TH2 processes where TH1 is going down and you're allowing infection to run loose in your body, while TH2 is going up and you're rejecting all the foods. So the endocannabinoid system seems to be part of holding all that in its proper perspective. So the two receptors that are there, you got the CB1 receptors, which are predominantly a central nervous system function, and the CB2 receptors, which are in the peripheral organs, especially in the immune system. So yes, you do make cannabis by itself. Here's some of the nice slides you can find on the web. This is from thehumansolution.org, where they're showing you the CB1 and CB2 receptors. You'll see in the diagram of the man, the light colors there are where the CB1 receptors are through the central nervous system. And then the CB2 receptors are throughout. You'll see a bunch around the thymus gland, moving down through the lymphatics, and some there in the central organisms, or in the central organisms. Organs! That's the one. Okay, so CB1 responds to THC, and it responds to the endocannabinoids, which we'll look at next. CBN they have there listed as a key going into the CB2 receptors, into the more immune-based CB2 receptors, and you'll notice that the cannabidiol there, the CBD key, is black. It doesn't technically fit into either the CB1 or the CB2. Now, Joe Cohen, when he was speaking at A4M, brought up that there is recent evidence that it does actually tag the receptors, but it's a very weak agonist. That is not primarily its role. Its role is more on controlling where endocannabinoids and exogenous cannabinoids like THC and CBD, where they go, how they hit the different receptors. The most obvious and tangible effect in this aspect of modulating receptors is how CBD modulates the effect of THC on those cannabinoid receptors. I don't know. If you take THC alone, it will strike the CB1 receptor directly. And that will result in a very psychoactive effect on the body. Now, if you take CBD with the THC will now split its roles between the CB1 and the CB2 receptors. And this modulates that psychoactive effect so that it's much less strong. This is really good if you're looking to use mixed THC CBD blends in states where medical marijuana is legal. You really need the CBD so that the THC can strike the CB2 receptors and have the immunomodulatory effects that you can get from cannabinoids. Now, CBD also has very direct effects on glutamate receptors in the brain and on expression of genes. So we will go through those in depth. Now, the story is evolving, and I forgot to put the credit on here. I don't remember the name of this company. It's a pretty slick company, and they're selling systems for taking cannabinoids into drug type channels. And here they're expanding the receptors into the TRPV1 and the TRPA1. The TRPV1, the TRPs are transient receptor potential receptors, and the V is a vanilloid. I forget what the A is. The vanilloid receptors are interesting. These are the receptors that get hit when you eat capsaicin that cause pain in your mouth. But what they do by causing pain in your mouth is then they lower pain signals going up to the brain and they mute pain. That's why you have capsaicin patches. This is part of why CBD works on pain and part of why topical CBDs work so well on pain. So if we look at CBD and pain, there is an anti-inflammatory effect and there's increasing anti-inflammatory genes and decreasing expression of inflammatory cytokines. But then another part of pain is the GABA part. So in the neurotransmitters in the brain, there's 80% of the symphony up there is between glutamate and GABA. And they're in a balance. But what happens is GABA becomes too intense. So CBD brings up glutamate becomes too intense, and CBD brings up the GABA tone in the system. And GABA, that relaxing parasympathetic autonomic activity of GABA, is necessary for shutting down pain receptors. Pain receptors get stuck wide open and they need to be shut. And to do that, you need good GABA tone. So to stop pain, you need to quench inflammation, you need to bring up GABA tone, and you're also able to hit these TRPV1 receptors, which mute the pain response. So this system is getting more and more complex as we look at it, and the overlapping effects of the neurotransmitters, the neuroendocrine, and the neurohormonal system. The endocannabinoid system is responsible for tying all of those together. Now, the CB2 receptors have been tied to so many different organs, and this slide from Martha has all the different organs which have CB2 receptors and all of the different dysfunctions that have been linked to dysregulation of the endocannabinoids. It was Ethan Russo who wrote the first paper on endocannabinoid deficiency and how that is a likely part of chronic issues like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and possibly even the neurodegenerative issues like Parkinson's and MS. So what are our endocannabinoids? Endocannabinoid number one is anandamide. Ananda, if you are into Hindu or Tibetan writing, you know that ananda means bliss. And so this technically means the bliss molecule. This was first identified by W.A. Devane and other people in Raphael Mechoulam's group at Hebrew University in 1992. Later, I think 1994-95, the next cannabinoid, 2-AG, was identified. So anandamide you can find in chocolate. That's part of why chocolate makes us more blissful. It is produced during meditation, and it is linked to the runner's high effect. The other endogenous cannabinoid 2-arachidonyl glycerol. We can just call it 2-AG. That makes it a little bit easier. And 2-AG is present in very large amounts. Anandamide is present in smaller amounts and 2-AG in much larger amounts. It's technically a neuromodulator. Some people would say it's a neurotransmitter, but it's controlling signaling in the brain. I've seen some people say that it's dominantly a CB2 agonist, where anandamide is CB1, but the more I read, the more I see it hits CB1 as much or more. Now, 2-AG is found in animal milk, especially very high amounts in breast milk. All right, in fact, it even has its own transporter system. So you have your own cannabinoid system. It is okay. It happens in you. You make these things. So, phytocannabinoids. Cannabinoids we take in from other sources to help work on that receptor system, work on that endocannabinoid system. Now, THC is the one that we've all known for most of our lives. We've heard about that for good or for bad. And it is the very psychoactive cannabinoid. It is a strong CB1 and CB2 receptor with focus on CB1 in the absence of CBD. When CBD is in the mix, it is splitting its role between CB1 and CB2, which is why, say, the 1-to-1 THC CBD is the go-to therapeutic blend that's used in the medical marijuana legal states. Now, CBD is the hero of our story here. It is the non-psychoactive one, though you do get a neurological effect from it because it calms the system down well. It's technically a very weak CB1 and CB2 agonist, but again, it very strongly changes which receptors the other cannabinoids go to, and it's a very strong transcription modulator. So let's skip through that one. Here is a piece, okay. Here's a picture of our neuroreceptors, and we have in there both anandamide and 2-AG being made. Let's see if we're being made. There's 2-AG being made and moving into its sites. We have anandamide being made and then taken up into sites, and here we have the breakdown of anandamide. So all neurotransmitters are formed and destroyed at certain rates, and sometimes those rates are not very well balanced. So in the story of endocannabinoid deficiency, with anandamide, there's a rapid breakdown of the anandamide by the FAH, the FAAH, it's fatty acid hydrolase, I think. And one of the things that our friend CBD does for us is to slow down that breakdown. And in the case of 2-arachidonyl glycerol, the CBD is able to increase synthesis. So CBD is enhancing endocannabinoid tone by 1, increasing synthesis of 2-arachidonyl glyceride, and 2, by blocking the FAH enzyme from breaking down anandamide. So that's allowing a pooling up of anandamide and an increase in the synthesis of 2-arachidonyl glycerol. So it's important for you to see that there are an immediate effect of CBD, which you'll feel if you take a lot of CBD, you feel your system just let down. If you have anxiety, you really feel it. The more like hyper anxious your system is, the more you'll feel that calming. So there's an immediate effect on the glutamate receptors, but then there's a long-term effect by building up and lubricating your own endocannabinoid system, and that is going to result long-term in more integrity to this neuroendo immune system. All right, so let's talk now about liposomes and lipid nanoparticles. So, liposomes, you hear me talk about them a lot. I have some pretty new slides for you. And so phosphatidylcholine is the core to making liposomes or liposomes. And here you have a picture of phosphatidylcholine. You see it's got its fatty acid tail here, and up at the top it has a water-soluble head. These arrange into what are called bilayer sheets, and really they're not straight like that, they're rounded, and they complete themselves into vesicles that look just like this. Notice that this looks just like a cell, so it's got a bilayer spherical membrane. It's a vesicle, and it's got a little water payload in the middle that can hold a water-soluble molecule. Now, in this picture, they put some little fat-soluble elements in the membranes, and it is true that the membranes can have lipophilic compounds in them as well. Though really, if we're going to do lipophilics, we're going to do a different particle system. We're going to do a nano-emulsion or lipid nanoparticle that doesn't have a water core, but instead has a lipid-based core. And of course, when you hear me talk about these things, you'll hear me talk about how the delivery vehicle itself, the liposome or the emulsion, is bringing in phospholipids into the system that can then be part of building membranes and membrane-like structures like the endoplasmic reticulum. And that's a big part of the activity or the therapeutic activity of all these products that we make. Now, one of the very attractive aspects of a liposome is its ability to deliver its payload more efficiently into the cells. And you'll see lots of, if you Google liposome cell interactions, you'll see a lot of pictures like this where the liposome's membranes fuse with the cell membranes, and you have this delivery either by an endocytosis or a pinocytosis, some sort of vesicular bringing the liposome into the cell, or just fusing with the outside of the membrane, and you're able to get a more advanced delivery into the cell. So that's one of the things that we like about it. Now, when we take oral liposomes or nanoemulsions, we're getting them to absorb beginning right in the oral cavity, and then as they go down through the GI tract, rapidly absorbing into circulation. Some of these are rupturing as they go into circulation, and you have the raw compounds moving through the blood, and some of the particles are going to be delivered intact, and they'll find their targets throughout the body. Now, what's important, I want to make you guys experts in these kind of lipid nanoparticles like liposomes. I want you to understand size, and I want you to be able to visually recognize different sizes. So one of the easiest ways to categorize liposomes is through their size. And you'll see I have that simplistic diagram over on the left that we've been looking at, and now we have, with those red layers, we have 3 different size classes. Now ideally we would have made that MLV much bigger, but you see the MLV, that means multilamellar vesicle. A lamella is a layer or a leaf. And so you have multiple layers. This happens when you first mix the phospholipids and other surfactants into the water. You get these multiple layer structures that are from 300 to 5,000 nanometers in size. They're very unstable, and it consists of bilayer water, bilayer water, bilayer water. They're way too fast for a rapid uptake. You will get some increase in GI absorption just by all those phospholipids starting to open up the permeability of the GI tract. But really we want to get down to the SUV, not the sport utility vehicle, but the small unilamellar vesicle. Small unilamellar vesicle. So you see in the middle is the large unilamellar vesicle at 100 to 300 nanometers, and then the small one at 20 to 100 nanometers. Now let me tell you, these are pretty easy to visually differentiate, because small unilamellar vesicles are clear. Why is that? Because anything less than 100 nanometers is smaller than wavelengths of light. And so you got a little particle, and the wavelengths of light just roll around it. Whereas the big one, they hit it and they bounce off and they create a diffraction pattern. So the MLVs and the LUVs will be milky to gel. MLVs, the real large ones, are usually a gel-like structure, and they're often not even liposomes until they meet water, and then they become these large, the multilamellar vesicles. The large unilamellar vesicles look like milk, and the small unilamellar vesicles are clear. So it's, in a second we'll look at a picture of some of those. So now to continue on the different types of particles, if we look over at the 3 yellow spheres there, here we have the lipid bilayer with water in the middle. That is a liposome. Here we have a monolipid layer with the fatty acid tails into a droplet of liquid lipid. That would be called a nanoemulsion. Some people will call it a liquid lipid nanoparticle. That one's not so common. And then over here we have a solid lipid nanoparticle. This is made when they take waxy type oils, like monodiglycerides, heat them up till their melting temperature and homogenize them then with the surfactants and then cool them down. Of the two, we use the liposomes and the nanoemulsion. And if we're going to deliver a fat soluble compound, we are going to use the nanoemulsion. Now I don't know if my picture is over top of this particle here, so we'll just move it over here. And did I move my picture out of the way? Okay, so my picture persists up there. All right, well, if there's pictures over there, I'll try to move. If there's something you got to see, I'll try to move my picture. So up on the top is a more realistic diagram of how we do a really good nanoemulsion. We'll use at least 2 different types of surfactants, often some different essential oils or carrier oils in there along with the phosphatidylcholine. We often use TPGS, tocopherol polyethylene glycol succinate is the best of the co-surfactants for doing this. And there you've got the hydrophobic phase in the center, and that's where the cannabinoids would be. And you've got the phospholipids and other surfactants on the outside stabilizing that little nano drop of oil. Oops. Okay, so here's the key to the whole thing. Size. Small size penetrates fast. So this is a study done with CACO2 cells. These are an intestinal model cell, and they're used as a model for GI uptake. And they used a compound that would not go into the cells normally unless it was in a liposome. And they took discrete sizes of liposomes. You see 236, 168, 97, 79, 64, and 50 nanometers in these different treatments. And the black bars are a 15-minute incubation with the fluorescent molecule in the liposome. And the white bars are a 60-minute incubation. Taller the bar, more gets in. You'll notice more gets in after 60 minutes than after 15 minutes. But the 15 minutes are a good model for us. We can see that without a liposome, you get nothing into the cell. At 236 nanometers, which would be a large unilamellar vesicle, those look like milk. That is the smallest end of all the other nutraceutical liposomes out there, except for Redisorb, they're around 150, 170. So at 236, you just get a little blip in there. Now drop down to 97 nanometers and you have a 9-fold increase in uptake. Go to 64 and you have a 34-fold increase in uptake rate. 34-fold. You go to 50, you're at 40 nanometers. That's as small as they went. Now nanoemulsions with some of the lipid solubles are even smaller. They can be down to 20 nanometers. So everything that we make at Quicksilver Scientific is in this 50 to 80 range, really. There might be something in the 97 range, but most is in the 50, actually in the 20 to 80 range. And each compound that we make, each product we make is slightly different sizing, slightly different particle to accommodate the compounds that we're trying to put in there. This is an art. It has to be done correctly so that each one of these products is stable. Now, what do I mean by stable? Let's take a look at what stable is and what not stable is. All right, that'll be in the next slide. We'll look at the different ones. But in the Quicksilver delivery system, and there's the mark up top of the Quicksilver delivery system, you'll see that on various bottles. Here's it on our bottles, distinguishing it as Quicksilver delivery system. But it's a Quicksilver product, so you probably figure it's Quicksilver delivery system. But if you were to look at somebody else's product that we make, you'll find Quicksilver delivery systems, and that will be a mark of trust for you. And if you don't like the product, come and yell at us, and we'll give you a new one. Should I have said that?
Yes.
Phones are ringing. No. Everybody's going to be happy, so that's why I said that. So All these things are sized 100 nanometers and below. As far as I know, everything that we make right now is between 20 and 80 nanometers. We're using the highest possible grades of ingredients. Each different particle is tuned with component ratios to match the compound that's in it. When I show you some of these other products that are sort of pretending to be what ours are, you just see visually that they weren't able to do it. You got to get the ratios all perfect. So, especially when you get to glutathione, highly stable, low degradation products. Glutathione is a great way to measure the quality of a system. You just open it up, look at it, and smell it. It should not smell like hydrogen sulfide. That is a breakdown product of the glutathione. And it should be looking the same all the way through. Here is a great example of that. Here is the Quicksilver glutathione over on the left side. You see that picture of it in a centrifuge tube. We put it in the tube and put it in a centrifuge. And what you'll see in an unstable product is separation. The two destabilizations that you'll commonly see in any kind of emulsion system is creaming, where the lipids move to the top, they break away from the phosphate heads, move to the top, or sedimentation, where they move to the bottom. You'll also see aggregation, where small particles come together into big ones, but you'll mostly see that when you look at a laser sizer. So there you see it's clear from top to bottom. This is about 70 nanometers, 70, 80 nanometers. There's a measurement on the next page. And it's the same throughout. It is not separating. This is a small unilamellar vesicle. And that puts it in the size range of the rapidly absorbed particles. Now, on the other side, you see a competitor's particle. Go away. There you go. Two products made by the same manufacturer under different labels. One is yellow because it's got a little bit of B vitamins in it, and you'll see up here that layer that floated to the top, and this will happen if you just pour it out into a tall thin glass. Overnight you'll see stuff float to the top. That's called a creaming layer. Those are phospholipids that are broken apart and they're no longer available to make liposomes. Then you see this heavy layer down here and a clear layer here. This is not right. This is all broken apart into different phases basically, and I'll show you how much glutathione ended up being in there. This one has not broken into 3 phases, but you still have that creaming layer on top. Now, these are both very large liposomes, and how do you know? Look, it's milky. If it's milky like that, it's got to be over 200 nanometers. It's usually around 300 nanometers. If it's clear like this, it's got to be less than 100 nanometers. All right, very simple. Now we'll show you some more examples of all that, but let's look at the measurements of this. So here we have our glutathione. There's the size measurement. Every batch that we make, while we're making it, beginning, middle, and end, we're running size profiles on it to see if we have to change any of the shear dynamics, anything that we have to do to keep us in the spec, in our specification for size. So here you see this is 71.5 nanometers as a mean size. You send it out for measurement. We have 104 out of 100 milligrams per ml. That's final label claim content, and everything looks great. Now let's look at these competing liposomes. Here in this yellowish one, and incidentally you should open these up and smell it during our sort of expose on these things. We open them up and stank the whole room up. And this actually claimed to be 85 nanometers, and when it's measured it is 304 nanometers. And when it was measured for glutathione content, 32 out of 500 milligrams. 6% of label claim remaining because it's all broken down. One of the other great, in this comparative marketing, we're smaller, we cost less, and we don't need to be refrigerated. Great, have fun with that. Don't refrigerate your glutathione. You see what happens? 1 month, unrefrigerated, 20% loss. 1 month at 35 degrees, 50% loss. You gotta refrigerate it. A couple of days at room temperature or slightly elevated is fine. But anything extended, you're gonna end up like this. The other one, the creamy looking one, 161 out of 500 milligrams. That's 30% of label claim, 323 nanometers, not 85. Okay, well, now here's their vitamin C, and what do we see at the top of theirs? A creaming layer again, destabilization. This was also measured in the 300 nanometer range. We didn't send it out for vitamin C testing. There's our clear vitamin C. We've measured this back as far as 2 years old now. Still have 100% of label claims. Still have stability to the particles. So are you going to pay a little bit more for Quicksilver liposomes? Yes, you are. Not a lot more, but this is what you're going to get. All right. Oh, there's another one. This is a CoQ10 resveratrol mix that's supposed to be some sort of cold fusion nanotechnology. 5,000 nanometer particles. You see when they get centrifuged, they all fall to the bottom. That's chunks of stuff, we call it. There's the CoQ10, that's around 30-40 nanometers, and there's our new resveratrol being sent to Brandon Credeur at Biogenetics. It's not in the Quicksilver line, it's in the Biogenetics line, and that one comes in somewhere around 20 nanometers. That is a hot product. All right, uptake, you've seen these things before. The orange line is B12 sublingually or intraorally held. The blue line is a competitor's, quote, sublingual. You see they don't absorb till between 50 and 60 minutes. Ours absorbs right away. If you look at the uptake graph on the right side, a 4-minute point there has 20% absorption. A 15-minute point has 35%, and around 45 minutes you already got about 70% of your absorption. So you got a bilayer limb here. You have the first amounts absorbing in the mouth and right in the upper GI tract, and then the rest of it on a slow absorption, the other 30% or so absorbing in the GI tract. All right, so liposomal hemp extract. What do I call it there? I call it a neuroadaptogen. So if you guys know what adaptogens are things that bring high down and low up. They bring things into the middle. The adaptogens you would know, and I'll show you some pictures about them later, because I love more than anything to blend together cannabidiol for the brain and the nano-mojo for the adrenal and hormonal system below. I call this the top-down, bottom-up stabilization system. So adaptogens would be like ginseng, ashwagandha, eleuthero. You probably don't know jugulans or jaugulan, but should. It's in the mojo. So this, unfortunately, I forgot to change. That says European source hemp extract in our Colorado hemp oil. All right, that's not true. Colorado hemp extract in our Colorado hemp oil at 6 milligrams per mil. With small amounts of the other non-psychoactive entourage phytocannabinoids, CBG, CBC, CBDV. The plant is legal under the Farm Bill because it is certified to have less than 0.3% THC before it is harvested. Every batch harvested in Colorado has to be certified by the Colorado State Department of Agriculture, and if they register above 0.3% THC in the whole plant, they are burned to the ground. I do know one company that lost a $250,000 crop because it came in around 0.4. So all of these are legal, non-psychoactive, and then we put them into our delivery system for exceptional bioavailability. Now, in our particle system for hemp, here you're dealing with a nano-emulsion, or more clearly something a little bit like this. Now, it says microemulsion. This is not a microemulsion. It is a nano-emulsion. It uses shear to get down to these sizes, and it is rather stable at that point. All right, well, here is one of the outputs of our sizing. It was about a 20 nanometer particle. Very small, very rapid uptake. That was a very important slide. Okay, so you all know that we make good liposomes here, good nanoemulsions, all lipid nanoparticles we make here with exceptional quality because we obsess on it. Now, you're going to see a lot of liposomal CBDs, liposomal hemp extracts, and the worst of them all, liposomal hemp oil. Why is that the worst of them all? Is there any CBD in liposomal hemp oil?
No, it's derived from the seed, not the whole plant.
Why would you ever make that?
Because you're a crook.
Ooh. Philip lays it out. All right, so there's a lot of things coming on the market. There is a liposomal hemp, I don't know what they call it. They used to call it liposomal CBD. A lot of people are calling it hemp oil and hemp extract now just because of regulations. But there is one there where they say liposomal hemp oil, and it's actually not hemp extract. And the hemp extract, the whole plant extract, is what is going to have cannabidiol and other phytocannabinoids in it. And this particular product had only hemp seed oil in a liposome. There's no real reason to put hemp seed oil in a liposome. And people now, because they're confused, because we keep calling everything hemp oil instead of CBD, they're going to buy the liposomal hemp oil thinking that there's CBD in it, which there's not. Now, in our picture here, we have, of course, our nano-emulsified Colorado hemp oil. You see it's clear from top to bottom after being centrifuged. And then you have another competitor's product. This one comes in a little black bottle. And it's called liposomal hemp oil, but when you put it under centrifugation, it breaks into 3 distinct layers. A gum layer, and they use xanthan gum, a phospholipid layer in here, and up at the top is your CBD. Wow, that means that was never a particle at all. It was a crude mixture. One of the sort of cheats that people use when they can't make a stable emulsion is to use xanthan gum. It makes it so thick that gravity doesn't separate the oils, and so they don't cream or they don't separate. But if you put it in a centrifuge, it does. So this wasn't even a liposome or a nano-emulsion or anything. It was just a crude mixture. And if you're going to pay that much money, it would be good to have what you paid for. All right, come on, go forward. All right, so here, deliverance. Here's a pharmacokinetic study that we did using 10 volunteers and using the nano-emulsified Colorado hemp oil, and we compared it to the data published by GW Pharma for Sativex. So the dotted line here is GW Pharma's uptake profile using 10 milligrams of CBD. Now their product is a 1-to-1 mixture of ethanol and propylene glycol. Not my favorite thing to use, especially at a 50% ratio. But ethanol and propylene glycol, these are solvents that dissolve the CBD, and they're permeation enhancers. Meaning when you spray them in your mouth, they kind of help dissolve a little layer of your mouth so that these things can penetrate and you get higher absorption. Now, it's not in a discrete particle system, so when the saliva mixes with it, all those oils crash out, and then you swallow them. You get a little in fast, and then the rest gets swallowed and gets absorbed in the GI tract. Now, on the top, then, you have the uptake from the nano-emulsified Colorado hemp oil for 5 milligrams. Half as much load, 3 times as much absorption, meaning you have 6-fold increase in bioavailability over the Sativex product. And the Sativex is already a high absorption product, meaning you're 6 to 10-fold increased bioavailability over a raw hemp oil. That is really significant. All right, so we know it goes in well, we know it's made well. But first, let's take a detour because I want to tell you just for a little bit about other herbal adaptogens and tell you about some of the more complex systems that are coming our way. Now, we've started to do multi-component formulas where we're using lots of different herbals. And to do this, we have to make even more complex particles to hold all of this stuff. Now, this is this picture has got a crystalline drug in there. It's got RNA in there. We're not putting RNA and crystalline drugs in there. We're putting 20 different herbs in there, or we're putting 9 different herbs in there if we're looking at Dr. Shade's bitters. The Nano Mojo is our new adaptogenic blend. We've got 20 different herbs from 3 continents. It's a collaboration between Sunhorse Energy and Quicksilver Delivery Systems. It's the Quicksilver Sunhorse mix. You see the label there with its pretty gold and silver foil. This is the first time adaptogenic herbs have gone into one of these lipid delivery systems. It ended up being so efficient as a delivery that we use 1/8 the amount, or is it 1/5 the amount of herb from the raw blend. They make a liquid blend that you usually take 3.3 ounces to get the desired effect. And now with this, we're using about 0.8 to 1.6 ml. It's a much smaller amount of the herbal blend because it's so efficiently delivered. And we've had such good results having not just this alone, but this with the CBD. I'll talk about that more at the end, but let's just look at what's in the adaptogen blend before we leave the adaptogens. At the top is gynostemma, or jiaogulan. Jiaogulan is the coolest adaptogen because the least people know about it. It wasn't even in the TCM, the traditional Chinese medicine pharmacopoeia, because it was from a little area of central western China. And most of the TCM was developed in other areas. And in this area, people were notoriously long-lived. It was like the Hunzas up in the Himalayas. And they even had a word for people who went away and started looking bad and came back because they didn't look as good as people who stayed in the village there, because the people who stayed in the village took copious amounts of the jiaogulan. Then, of course, there's American ginseng, which is arguably the most well-known one. We've got Eleutherococcus senticosus. Some people call it Siberian ginseng. That's got the most data as an adaptogen. You've got ashwagandha, schizandra, rhodiola rosea, lychee. There's the medicine hunter, Chris Killam. And then some South Americans. Most people don't think about acai as an adaptogen, but it's a very well-rounded, harmonizing compound to put in adaptogenic mixes. Maca is, of course, known for its work on hormones. Catawba is a little bit more of a mojo herb. And then you've got reishi, astragalus, licorice, Bulgarian tribulus terrestris, and epimedium, known more commonly by its moniker horny goatweed. So, all those things together make Nano Mojo, and I really encourage you to blend together Nano Mojo and CBD. What do I mean by top down, bottom up? Calming the neurological system and the autonomics with the CBD, the neuroadaptogen, filling in the adrenals and the hormones with the adrenoadaptogen Nano Mojo. All right, so now let's talk about how CBD works in the body and why I think that this is the most important addition to functional medicine in the last couple of decades. So what I want to talk about most, first at least, is neuroinflammatory processes, and then I'll talk about gene upregulation around peripheral inflammatory processes. So neuroinflammation, this is stabilizing NMDA receptors, well, stabilizing all the glutamate receptors. That's the NMDA receptors, the kainate receptors, and I forgot the name of the third glutamate receptor. But all of them are targets for neurotoxic processes and neuroimmunological inflammatory processes. The immune system is not supposed to turn up inflammation in the brain, but often it does, and this is a neuroinflammatory cascade, and it invokes the glutamate receptor, and we're going to watch how CBD is able to block this cascade at several different areas. Now, part of its anti-inflammatory effect is its downregulation on nuclear factor kappa beta, or NFKB, and at the same time it's turning down that, and it's turning down a number of other pro-inflammatory cytokines. It's upregulating our typical hero, NRF2. That's the one that we want to invoke when we're doing detoxification or neuroprotective work. So this becomes a huge basis for a neurodetox. Oh, I forgot to put it in there, by combining it either with the Nano Mojo or with PC, which we use a lot, activated B complex, glutathione. These are all great things for stabilizing brain activity. So let's talk about neuroinflammation. I got rid of the weird picture of the screaming woman, and I've gone to a burning brain. I think a burning brain is a fine image here.
It's better.
All right, so neuroinflammation. neuroinflammation. What is neuroinflammation? What lights that brain on fire? And so this is an immune activation where astrocytes are infiltrating, getting too much activity across the blood-brain barrier, activating the microglia. The glia, they kind of change shape and they start making these different compounds that they usually don't make, and these compounds are pro-inflammatory. So what are these immune activators? Well, Lyme disease and co-infections. Viruses are really good, and they're starting to find a lot with Alzheimer's. There's a lot of underground viral activity. Underground meaning it's not so active that the doctors would normally see it. It's like a smoldering fire underneath. Human herpes virus 6 is the most notorious of the neurological viruses. In fact, it's estimated that 95% of the population has herpes 6 in their brain, but something activates it and causes these immune cascades. Beta amyloid is well known to do some of this activation, as are other infectious sources and multiple environmental toxins. But we're going to see in the next slide that it's more complex. Some environmental toxins are hitting the glutamate receptors, and some are activating it at a glial level. So this is a really important concept slide here. All right, so this is the self-propelling neurotoxicity cycle. So triggering this can come from an immuno-inflammatory trigger, or it can come from a direct neurotoxic insult. Now, the inflammatory trigger will activate the microglia. The microglia will release pro-inflammatory cytokines and free radicals like peroxynitrate, which will then insult the neurons. I feel my neurons being insulted. I am mad. And what happens when an angry neuron reacts? He yells back at the microglia, further perpetuating the cycle of violence, sending calpain, MMP3, synuclein, and other nasty things at the microglia, and the microglia gets mad and he strikes back again. And then it's just going and going and going and going, and soon we're in some sort of religious war here. I didn't say that. Okay, so the microglia activation can come from LPS, lipopolysaccharides, endotoxin. We talk about this a lot as an inflammatory mediator. It can also come from certain chemicals which must behave like immunoinflammatory mediators, like paraquat, rotenone, dieldrin. Or it can come as a direct neurotoxic insult. Glutamatic cytotoxicity can come from mercury, come from glyphosate. That's everybody's favorite toxin these days. Is that your favorite toxin? No. She's like, what? How can I have a favorite toxin? Well, it could be people's favorite toxin. They love talking about Roundup and glyphosate these days, and it turns out glyphosate isn't glutamatic cytotoxin. Mold toxins, bang, right in there. Lyme toxins, bang, in there. Dysbiotic toxins. And I listed glyphosate twice because it's popular these days. It needs to be listed twice. All right. Let me get to the next one. Oh, and there it is. There's glyphosate-based herbicide. Mechanisms underlying neurotoxicity induced by glyphosate. Involvement of glutamatic cytotoxicity. So we know that glyphosate can come in, hit the glutamate receptors, and start this cascade. Now, how can CBD help us? Here we have a great paper. Cannabidiol in vivo blunts beta amyloid-induced neuroinflammation by suppressing IL-1B and INOS expression. Those are pro-inflammatory cytokines released by the microglia. So they stop the angle, boom, right where that circle is. Here we have decreased glial reactivity can be involved in the antipsychotic-like effect of cannabidiol. Here, stabilizing microglia, stopping the release of the pro-inflammatory cytokines. Incidentally, if you're looking at something, I forget the name of the psychosis, but THC is a little pro-psychotic, and CBD is antipsychotic. So in the cases of schizophrenia, THC exacerbates schizophrenia, where CBD is known to blunt the effects of schizophrenia. So very interesting how those two work together or work against one another. Here we have neuroprotective antioxidants from marijuana affecting the NMDA receptors, CBD and THC, both stabilizing the NMDA receptor. mechanism. Oh, that was glyphosate again. Look, I got to show it again. But since those are acting at an NMDA receptor or glutamate receptor level, we know that the CBD will be stabilizing the neuroreceptors there, the glutamate receptors there. In fact, when we really came to understand this the most was when we started traveling around to a lot of conferences, and you go to conferences in moldy areas. San Diego was one, and bar none, above all, was the Diplomat Hotel in Hollywood, Florida, A4M in the fall. We went there. The Diplomat, people like going to the Diplomat because most of the hotel opens up on the ocean, and you have this, going out of your hotel room, you've got this balcony, and you look out on the ocean. Well, they closed all of those up to redo all of the waterproofing on the outside, because obviously they were getting a lot of water in because the whole hotel was filled with mold, and they just sealed the damn thing shut. Never in my life have I seen so many glazed-eyed doctors looking cross-eyed coming up to me and being like, what do you have? I'm like, don't you know me? Chris, like we know each other. And they're like, and so we give them CBD, and all of a sudden, whoosh, the clouds part, and they're like, my God, how did I get here? It was really that bad. Maybe not quite that bad, but it was really bad. Christina, was it bad?
It's really bad.
It was really bad. We call it neurochaos. And then in these places, they got massive EMF because they're broadcasting wireless all over the place. They've got all these HVAC systems going. There's stuff all over the place. And as soon as you start getting that neuroinflammatory cascade from all those mold toxins, then all that EMF starts working on you, and everybody was just a disaster. It's really hard to get through those days. And CBD was absolutely required before we could have a reasonable conversation with people. It was required before you could do any kinesiology testing on them. It was required before any of the other supplements worked on them. It was a prerequisite before anything could go on. Then I really got to understand how important this was. And since then, we've been really pushing it for this neuroinflammation stabilizing effect. And once you stabilize that brain, you're going to stabilize down into the autonomic nervous system, and you're going to set up the conditions for healing. Really chronically ill people need this more than any other supplement. No problem saying that. It is true. Interesting one here. In this one, the NMDA receptors were hypoactive, and the cannabidiol brought them up to normal activity. That's part of why I call it a neuroadaptogen. Hyperactive glutamate receptors are brought down, hypoactive ones are brought up, and we have stability to the brain happening again. And it is due to this exceptional bioavailability that such small amounts are able to work so well. In fact, we had a president of a hemp company come here the other day, and we give him 6 milligrams of cannabidiol, and a couple of minutes later he's like, oh my God, I can't believe that. I'd have to take 10 times more of our product to have that same effect. So you really have a winner of a product here. But hey, I wouldn't be Chris Shade if I didn't bring up NRF2. So let's talk now, after we talked about neurostabilization, let's talk about gene induction, specifically around detoxification and anti-inflammatory genes, NRF2 upregulation. At the bottom, you have a graph from mutation research I use all the time. NRF2 is a mechanism where certain conditions trigger the change in conformation of something called KEAP1, so that NRF2, which is called a nuclear nuclear transcription element, something like that. It'll come to me a little bit later. It is going to move into the nucleus, and it gets this pretty name that I forget now because it's able to go into the nucleus and turn on families of genes. It seemed like we had an endless amount of proteins and an endless amount of different pathways with an endless amount of genes, and there was just no accounting for how it was all put together. And then we found these transcription modulators like NRF2 that turn on families of genes. It turns out that families have what are called promoter regions that are unified between between these families. And so you have this trigger that turns on families of genes through the promoter region. And the promoter region here is called the antioxidant response element. Because they used to think it was responding to antioxidants, but it turns out it's actually making antioxidants. And one of the things that can trigger this is oxidative stress. But a lot of different plant-based compounds trigger upregulation of NRF2. And these are the things that we think of for detoxification. Things like the compounds from the crucifers, like sulforaphane and allyl isothiocyanate and other isothiocyanates like that, allicin and diallyl sulfide from garlic and alliums, and things like epigallocatechin from green tea extract, ellagic acid from pomegranate extract. All of these are inducers of NRF2, the one we use in our detox the most, besides haritaki polyphenols, would be lipoic acid. That's where it's acting. It's upregulating expression of all of your detoxification genes. And so, when you go online, you start reading about cannabidiol, you found cannabidiol protects liver from binge alcohol-induced steatosis by inhibiting oxidative stress. Well, how does it do that? That's through upregulating NRF2. Here's another one on alcohol protection, neuroprotection. Then do that by upregulating your protective mechanisms, all the detox mechanisms. Now, here's one of my favorite papers. Differential transcription profiles mediated by exposure to cannabinoids, cannabidiol, and delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol in BV2 microglial cells. Microglial cells are brain cells. So what's happening in the brain when you're exposed to CBD or THC? Turns out very different things. CBD is much broader in its effect on a transcriptional level. What does transcription mean? So transcription of a book would mean I got the book, I read it, and I write it down. Transcription in a biological context is the book is the DNA and the RNA write down the program and they take it to the ribosomes to make proteins. It's transcription of coding for proteins, bringing information into action. Oh, that sounds cool, doesn't it? Sounds like a slogan here. We're bringing information into action. So, glutathione, the hero of our normal lectures, is strongly upregulated by this, as are all the NRF2 things. So, here, this is really important. Let's just look at the top line. This really shows it all. This is the number of genes upregulated or downregulated by exposure to CBD or THC. So, downregulated. 517 genes downregulated by CBD versus only 29 by THC. 658 genes upregulated by CBD versus only 36 for THC. So THC is an actor on the receptor system. Like the endocannabinoids, it's hitting the same receptors. CBD is modulating not just where that goes into what receptors, but it's turning on a whole host of biochemistry around it to frame the action of the cannabinoids. Glutathione genes is not like you would know what the GCLM and the GP2 are, but the top ones there are for synthesis of glutathione. You see them 3 to 5-fold upregulated. Then you have a couple, the glutathionous transferase is the thing that links glutathione onto a toxin so that you can move it out of the body. You see strong upregulation there. And a couple more at the bottom for synthesis of glutathione. So the glutathione system is being picked up by CBD, not by THC. And then these are the things that downregulate. You're downregulating these CCLs. The CCLs are pro-inflammatory cytokines, or pro-inflammatory signalers. It's important during inflammatory activities. If you have an infection, inflammation is important, but it's important to be controlled. Endotoxin, or lipopolysaccharide, is a very out-of-control inflammatory signal. You get it from E. coli. If you get E. coli poisoning, you get it from a number of different anaerobic infections that can get into you. Now, we can get that from leaky gut, or we can get that from urinary tract infections, some from nasal tract infections, and it will make it into circulation, and they trigger a very intense inflammatory response, and it's sometimes a very damaging inflammatory response. So when they're testing compounds to be able to blunt damaging inflammatory responses, they often use lipopolysaccharides because they always create a really damaging inflammation. And they found that when CBD is used to treat the organism of the cells before the lipopolysaccharide insult, there's much less damage. And they say at the end there, the effects of CBD on the STAT3 and SOX3, those are different gene cassettes involving exaggerated inflammation, could underlie the potential benefits of CBD in the treatment of neuroinflammatory diseases. So in the brain, CBD is controlling inflammatory processes. Incredibly important. When you see me lecture before, this is a good one to help frame how important it is to control inflammation. When I'm talking about mercury and other metals and detoxification, I talk about how concurrent inflammation with toxicity creates an exaggerated damage. So just look at the title here, concurrent inflammation as a determinant of susceptibility to toxicity from xenobiotic agents. Brilliant title. Concurrent inflammation, meaning inflammation with the toxic exposure at the same time, determines your susceptibility to the toxicity of that chemical. So when inflammation is high, the effect of the toxin is much greater, because when inflammation goes up, detoxification goes down. They go like that. You shut off detoxification in the face of high inflammation because you think, well, I better have this inflammation and I have to kill a lot of things with pro-oxidant activity, whereas detoxification is an antioxidant activity. So you need controls on that inflammatory process. And so in this paper, they have a time sequence here. Oop, wrong guy. They have a time sequence, and they have through time pulses of lipopolysaccharide or endotoxin going into circulation, creating times where you're more susceptible to toxicity. So a GI disturbance, remember I said leaky gut, letting lipopolysaccharides into the body. This is one of the great actions of CBD. It calms not just systemic inflammation, but GI inflammation. It's very good for healing the GI tract. So the GI disturbance is letting the lipopolysaccharides in. You've got all the mercury from the fish and the amalgams, and they hit together, and wham, it's a really destructive combination. Ooh, alcohol. Better be careful about that. Good thing we got a glutathione company, we got CBD to protect us. Infection. All these are pulses of inflammation into the system that are exacerbating the damage of the toxins that we're environmentally exposed to on a day-to-day basis. So control of inflammatory processes is super important. And this is one that I show a lot, and I'm showing it here. In this, these were mice exposed to just mercury or both mercury and endotoxin. And serum urea nitrogen is a measure of kidney damage. So here's mercury alone is nephrotoxic. Mercury plus lipopolysaccharide is very nephrotoxic, whereas lipopolysaccharide alone is not nephrotoxic. So look at the title, great title. Augmentation of mercury-induced nephrotoxicity by endotoxin. Augmentation. The endotoxin, the uncontrolled inflammatory process, is making everything more damaging. When we're taking things that control inflammation, we are making the toxins we're exposed to less damaging. Now, what we find in here, and this is really important to our mercury story, when we're talking about mercury story, in this we're looking at damage to the kidneys and the kidney transporters. Here with the mercury-treated rats over on the right side, you see very high mercury in the urine, and mercury plus endotoxin, you see low mercury in the urine. That's because the mercury-endotoxin combination is damaging the transport proteins in the proximal tubule of the kidneys that move the mercury into the urinary flow. I believe, and we're starting to test this, that CBD will be one of our great warriors in protecting against that damage. We found that until we normalize urine to blood ratios for inorganic mercury, they're a measure of damage to the transport system. Till we normalize that, we can't get the people better. And CBD will be the great anti-inflammatory that we use, in addition to using the kidney drainage herbs in the Dr. Shade's Bitters number 9. So I'm looking forward to seeing all the data around that, because I saw, part of our trip to Florida, we also saw some people who were they had kidney pain during detox, and the CBD released all that. Once it released their brains and they relaxed, I think that was an autonomic blockage around the kidneys, and a lot of that pain went away, and the detox got much easier. But the key to most of these people that were having a hard time detoxing was not just CBD, but CBD and the nano-mojo. The CBD would calm the whole system down, open up everything, and let them detox, while the nano-mojo brought the energy back into the system. Oh, and there is a picture of the urine to blood ratios that I was talking about. For those of you who have seen me lecture, we have an elevated level of inorganic mercury and this urine to blood ratio where you have high blood but low urine. What we want to do is damp the inflammation in the kidneys, restore the drainage, refeed those transport proteins until you get a urine to blood ratio that matches that diagonal line right there. This is just upregulation of NRF2, my favorite target for gene upregulation. So we have CBD here, stabilizing neuroinflammatory process by stabilizing NMDA and all the glutamate receptors, downregulating NF-kappa beta and other pro-inflammatory modulators through upregulation of NRF2 ARE. That's NRF2-antioxidant response element. The EHRI RE is electrophile response element. Electrophiles would be other compounds like PCBs and halogenated hydrocarbons, a lot of pesticides and herbicides. So NRF2 upregulation brings protection against all of those different environmental chemicals. And you can put the mold toxins in that bin as well. So this is a great basis for a neuro-detox system. You can combine, as I've said multiple times, with the nano-mojo. In fact, we've used this in autism. I wanted to get together some of the responses I got from the mothers who are using this, but it was really legendary. Some of the kids are really rolling back a lot of their issues, being able to think in time more, remember things that happened over the last week, put them into context to today's system, learning to spell, learning to ride bikes. It was all pretty stunning activity, all by this top-down, bottom-up system. Stabilize the brain, let that cascade through the autonomics, and then turn up the body's resistance to stress through the adrenals and all of the hormone glands. And then, of course, no neurodetox is complete without some phosphatidylcholine, a little B complex, and some glutathione. So I'm going to flash that up there. At the bottom is a tiny URL that you can write down, which is a link to purchase the 3 things that we have on sale in honor of this. Of course, the nano-mojo has to go on sale with the Colorado Hemp Oil, and the other one in our Relaxation Bliss Pack. We don't actually have a Relaxation Bliss Pack, but it would be called that if we wanted to. The GABA. So GABA, direct into the GABA receptors, more of a Band-Aid when you can't calm the system down, a little bit better for sleep. The CBD, Colorado Hemp Oil, more of a long-term lubrication of the endocannabinoid system and stabilization of the glutamate receptor. So you can use these together, boost the GABA tone, and calm down the glutamate system and increase endocannabinoid tone, and of course the mojo. So 10% off retail, 10% off for doctors as well. That link will give you the entrance into the 2 different sites for doing that. Now, do we have questions?
Thomas is going to chime in if there are questions.
Thomas is going to chime in. Philip has a question.
How many nanometers are there in a millimeter?
1,000,000! Nano, micro, milli. Good point. So what is a nanometer? It's a millionth of a millimeter, which is already a millionth of a meter. So it's a trillionth of a meter, if I'm getting that right.
It's a thousandth of a meter.
Oh, sorry, thousandth, so it's a billionth of a meter. 10 to the nano is 10 to the negative 9, a billionth of a meter. It's a small little amount.
So I wonder how many nanometers it would take to make a human hair.
Oh yeah, good question. How many nanometers in a human hair? I don't know. We'll come up with those things so you can visualize this a little bit better next time. But you got a millimeter, you know that. A thousandth of that is a micrometer. A millionth of that is a nanometer. And so at the high end, we're at 100 nanometers, which is a tenth of a micrometer. That would be 1/10,000th of a millimeter. So these are pretty small particles, hence why they're clear. Now, Tom Randolph, do you have any questions for us from the Peanut Gallery or from our viewers?
Any future plans for QS mineral supplementation other than selenium, especially magnesium and zinc?
Okay, magnesium and zinc are obvious minerals that go with all detoxification processes. We are working on a couple of different products for the mineral world. Doing things like magnesium and zinc are incredibly hard to do in a liposome because they destabilize the membranes through the phospholipids. They bind to the phospholipids. So we're not likely to have a sublingual of those, though I've been using other people's mineral formulas for a long time, but I've never really been happy with them. I always have to have people use the multi-mineral and add extra zinc, add extra selenium, add molybdenum. So we will have a complete product that has the appropriate amounts of magnesium, zinc, molybdenum, and selenium.
Thank you. Next question. Should we be pulsing CBD?
Great question. Do we pulse CBD? It's a little bit early to say that for sure, though. If you've heard me talk before, I say pulse everything. So I would do a little pulsing. For turning up endocannabinoid tone, where you're not turning up gene upregulation, it wouldn't matter as much. But if you are turning up gene upregulation, you should pulse it. 5 days on, 2 days off is good. 10 days on, 4 days off is another good way to go with that.
Are the doses on all liposomal products therapeutic doses, or can more be consumed? Vitamin C has a half-life in body. Does that still apply to liposomal vitamin C? And can all products be taken together?
Half-lives of liposomes are a little bit longer. They stay a little bit longer. It depends how fast they're absorbed, though. So the more rapidly absorbing ones, the half-lives tend to be a little bit more normal than the slow absorbing ones. You can always go to higher doses. We put baseline doses in there, but almost every good protocol is going to start low and march up, titrate up the dosing till you get to the levels that really induce a big change in the cells. Now, can everything be taken together? Everything we're talking about here can be taken together. In the detox system, we usually have you separate glutathione from IMD because they're both sulfhydryls and they can cross-link. So we like to separate those a good 20 minutes or so. Often I'll have people separate artemisinin from the antioxidants, have the antioxidants in the morning and the evening, and the artemisinin in the middle of the day, but that's a little bit perfectionistic. It's not totally necessary. But everything we talked about today, you can just take all at once. Now, you don't want to fill your mouth up too much because you want to get some of that transmucosal absorption, and if you take 20 pumps at once, you're sitting there with a lot of volume, so it's better to if you have the time to spread them into smaller amounts, maybe 4 pumps at a time.
Next question. Would the CBD or any other of your products act as a dopamine agonist?
Dopamine agonist, I can't say for absolute sure. The L-Dopa in nanoparticles certainly does. But I don't believe so. I've seen a lot of conflicting data on CBD and dopamine receptors, but I've never seen a dopamine type action from the CBD. Yohimbine, yes, but not from any of these.
Does CBD enhance the impact of pharmaceutical drugs? Would it be necessary to use pharmaceuticals carefully with CBD?
That's a really broad question. It really depends. CBD is often used to wean people off of opioids for pain because it's diminishing pain responses, it's increasing GABA tone, it's taking that irritating pain response out, and so people are able to pull back on their opioids and other pain-based pharmaceuticals.
Okay, I think that about covers it.
All right, for the first time ever, we are going to finish 5 minutes early. So thank you very much. You have your links there. We will, just to give you a little bit of heads up on what will be coming, we will have at least 2 more hemp extract based products. One will have other anti-inflammatories with it, like neuroprotective tocotrienol and boswellia. We possibly will have one out with some other neurotransmitters, like 5-HTP in it. And we also will have a THC-free one that will also be blended with tocotrienols and a couple other natural compounds to give it a more broad spectrum. But for people that worry about residual amounts of THC, the THC-free will be a good option. So thank you all very much. It's been great being here again. It's great talking to you. And we look forward to seeing you next time here on Quicksilver Scientific Webinar Series. Bye.